strictly utilitarian. So thank you all again for coming today. We have a beautiful weather outside. I don't think any of us is dying from the heat like we normally are some days in August. In fact, while I was driving here today, coming down I-75, there wasn't a lot of traffic, which was great. And coming around, I think Rochester Road or 14 Mile, I'm not sure, there's like a big curve right there, and the sky was blue, and just like the cement looked like sand, like a beach or something. And I had this moment where I was like, man, it's beautiful out here on the highway today. So thank you all for enjoying this beautiful day with us. I feel like lately I've been really struggling with my Dharma talks, and Reverend Bubsong can attest to that, because she gets many a late night text from me just saying that I'm having struggles. And I think especially this time around, part of the reason is that I've been just feeling kind of off lately. And it's one of those feelings where you feel off, but you don't really know why. So it's hard to remedy the situation because you're just feeling a little out of sorts. And I think we all get like that every so often. At least I hope we do. It's not just me. It's just that feeling of being maybe like a little run down, or just vaguely unsatisfied and unhappy. And I think I realized that being a clergy person can really just be exhausting sometimes. And I'm not talking about being up here on Sundays, although sometimes that can be tiring too if it's really hot, or doing work around the temple or anything like that. I'm talking about being out there, in the world. And I think all of us that have taken the precepts feel this way to some extent too, where you feel like you have this duty, to uphold this commitment that we have to follow the Dharma. And sometimes that can be really tiring and exhausting. We kind of hold ourselves to a certain level of conduct, and remembering and to always behave a certain way, or to act a certain way, and to react certain ways. It can be tiring, but that's the practice, right? Sometimes you just want to react or act out or say something nasty, or worse, succumb to doubt and lose hope. I know over the last couple years, I've had bouts where all of those things have come into play, some more than others. In 2020, I think a lot of you know, we had a pandemic, but also my mother was diagnosed with cancer, which she is in remission and doing well now, just update. But during that time, I started wearing a mala around my wrist, especially because we weren't meeting here every week. We were meeting virtually to a certain extent, but we weren't having our regular Sunday service or weekly meditation practice. And it was kind of a reminder to myself to remember my vows and to speak and act accordingly, both in terms of checking myself when, certain negative emotions would arise, but also, as a representation of my faith, and to remember that, there's always something besides this little tiny human brain that's going on and ruling things right now. To me, nothing is worse than a person who doesn't practice what they preach. especially when it comes to religion and faith. So I never want to be the person who's, wearing the Buddhist mala and, just kind of being some gossipy, horrible woman at the same time, and just saying, oh, that's that woman who claims she's a Buddhist, but we all know that, she's just putting on a show, That, to me, that is one of the worst things. So it really, it's a physical symbol that kind of keeps me in check. And I like to wear, of course, I'm not wearing one right now because I feel like this kind of is enough to keep me in check. But I like to wear one that is made out of stone because it's a little bit heavier than the wooden ones because it's heavy and it's hard to forget that it's there on your wrist. And I wear it a lot of the time, but especially when I'm at work, and especially lately because I know people think working in a library is all fun and games and reading and quiet and peace. It's not. It's really not. And lately it's been very difficult for various reasons. And so I've been wearing, especially my mala at work, just to kind of, keep myself in check and to keep, a reminder of my faith. And I've had people notice it, and I've had people ask about it. A lot of strangers will say that they like my bracelets, or they ask if I made it myself. And every so often I get asked if I'm Buddhist. And when I say yes, I usually get asked how I got into it. I think most people can tell that I probably wasn't born Buddhist. It's possible, but I think a lot of Westerners especially just assume that, if you're Buddhist in the West, you're probably converted to Buddhism. And I think we all have fairly similar stories about how we got into it. For those of us who have, converted from something else, we came across it probably on an intellectual frame where we learned about it in school, or we knew someone that was, practicing, or we read a book, or, that type of thing, and we became interested in it. And that's the same thing that happened with me. I have a very poor memory when it comes to certain things, and a very good memory when it comes to other things that are mostly inconsequential. Like, I can tell you details about something that happened when I was 4 years old. But there's a whole chunk of my life in my 20s where I really can't remember a whole lot, just because of my memory, no other reason. So I want to say the first time I heard about Buddhism or really kind of studied it was in college, when I took a class that was on the history of East Asia. And my teacher happened to be Buddhist. And so she she kind of focused on that a lot because that was her personal experience. But it was great. It was a great class. And, I kind of got interested in it that way, and then sort of forgot about it or pushed it to the back burner for, the next 20 years. And then I just reached a point in my life where I was like, all right, whatever I'm doing now isn't working for me, and it's not working for those around me. So I gotta, do something that will, not to sound cliche, but benefit myself and others, because what I'm doing isn't working. So I started to get more into practicing and studying the Dharma. And I started listening to a podcast from the Muddy Water Zen Temple in Royal Oak, Michigan, which I always say was kind of bizarre because I felt like I knew all of your voices, well, except for Bupeng. He's the silent partner. I knew all of your voices before I actually met you, and didn't actually know what you looked like either, because it was just the podcast. So when I came here for the first time, and I think Hato Sunam said hello to me, I was kind of like, oh, I remember him. In a good way. So that's how I started coming here to Muddy Waters Zen, and then I just never left, which I feel like is a lot of our stories as well. As we started coming here, we weren't too sure about it, and then we just never left. So that's how I got into Buddhism. But the question that I don't get asked, except for maybe one time, when someone close to me asked if I was Buddhist, and I said yes, and they said, "What does that do for you?" She meant well, but it was kind of a, ooh. Along those lines, the question I don't really get asked is, why are you still Buddhist? You know, I think a lot of people become Buddhist, and we all have a story about how we became Buddhist, but I guess for me, and maybe this is just for myself, I don't really stop and think about why I'm still here. You know, I'm still here, and I still, benefit greatly from it, but I don't really think about it. It just sort of is, right? Last week we were looking at pictures of the precept classes out in the Sangha room. And, it's just another reminder that, a lot of people become Buddhist, or they are Buddhist. But I don't know how many people stay Buddhist. I mean, I guess technically if you take the precepts, you're Buddhist, right? I don't know that you can untake the precepts unless you convert to a different religion. I guess by default, you're still Buddhist. And so maybe it would be beneficial to think about how we are Buddhist and why we are Buddhist. It's a lot harder to answer that question than it is, sort of the practicality of how you were introduced to Buddhism. So I really thought about this over the last, actually, I've been thinking about this for a while, but it kind of crystallized yesterday as I was writing this Dharma talk, because I feel like this goes a long way to explain that sort of general malaise that I've been feeling, this sort of untethered. It's good to be untethered to a certain extent. You don't want to be attached to things, but when you're completely out there and you're not even attached to your faith or your belief, it can be a scary place. So I was just thinking about answering this question, and I don't know that there's a good, tightly wrapped up answer to this question. So as I was thinking about this, I just thought of different things that I've experienced over the past couple weeks that I think go a way to answering the question for me. So last week I took one of my cats to the vet. As I think many of you know, I am a cat lady. I have 4 cats. Cut that part out. No one's supposed to know I have 4 cats. It's over the limit. So I took one of my cats to the vet, and this is my spicy vet cat. She, I believe she has some sort of a check mark on her file. I don't know if you do that at your practice, teacher, but I believe that there is some sort of a demarcation on Miss Marley's file that says this cat is spicy, and she may or may not try to bite you. So she was spicy. I took her to the vet. She was a little grumpy, and I feel like a pet parent. I feel a little responsible. I don't want my child to bite somebody. I mean, that's a horrible feeling, right? So I was kind of preoccupied with that and stressing out about, whether or not she was going to behave. And we were waiting and waiting, and it was taking a little bit longer than usual. And finally, the tech came in and said that they were backed up with patients because they were doing a cat euthanasia. And I could hear the person in the room next to me, it sounded like a woman, just sobbing uncontrollably. And, why, she's dying, why? And it really, in that moment, it just made me think about my grumpy cat and my preoccupation with that. And then this other person who's experiencing something different. There is a little spider who lives in my garage. I named her Charlotte. She or her progeny have been living in the same spot in my garage since I moved in 3 years ago. And each year she lays a whole bunch of eggs, spider egg sacs. And all summer long, one at a time, they kind of burst open and all these little tiny baby spiders come out. The other day I was in a garden and I was picking fresh tomatoes off the vine. A few days ago, I was at the grocery store and there was one cashier and it was like 5 o'clock on a Friday and I was waiting in line. The past few weeks, they're back home now, but the past few weeks my parents were out of town. They were on vacation. And so I was just going and checking on their house every couple days, checking the locks and turning the faucets on and off to make sure, everything was going okay. And I found myself, this is the house I grew up in. I found myself upstairs in my old bedroom, which has been converted into my dad's study. And I couldn't believe how tiny the room felt, just beyond tiny, with less furniture. I mean, there's no bed or anything anymore. It's literally got a lazy boy in it, and that's it. But the room felt so tiny, and the house was so silent. And I just sat there for a while. No matter where I am, I love hearing rain spattering on top of a roof. There's a squirrel that lives outside my front house, or the front door of my house. He's been unsuccessfully trying to build a nest for the past week. To me, being a Buddhist is wanting to do so much, but not knowing how. And accepting that there is always more to learn. Great is the matter of birth and death. Impermanence surrounds us. Be awake each moment. Do not waste your life. Thank you.